5 years ago, Xbox held a showcase to reveal a upcoming slate of tons of Xbox games coming to the next generation of consoles, the Xbox Series X and S. This was a show where they announced a ton of games, including Halo Infinite, Stalker 2, Fable, State of Decay 3, and many more. Among those games was Avowed, and Avowed is a game developed by a legendary studio, Obsidian Entertainment, which is known for making some of the greatest RPGs ever, period. And with this announcement came so much hype because this was Obsidian going fantasy. This was Obsidian working on a new IP, which is technically takes place in a universe that they have worked in before, which is Pillars of Eternity, and there was a lot of hype around this game. Did the game live up to the hype? This has been a long wait. It's been a long wait. We've waited 5 years, multiple updates. It's been in Developer Direct. It's been in showcases. It's had just individual trailers. The lead up has been interesting. It's been a roller coaster. There's been doubts. There's been concerns. There's been praises. There's been glaring highlights of this game. But now that it's officially here and I've put about 35 hours into the game, I have rolled credits. Did it live up to the hype? And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to be doing my Avowed review. If you guys love video games, consider subscribing, sharing with your friends. I appreciate all the support. It doesn't matter what you love. Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo, third-party, PC, VR, indie, and whatever else it may be. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I appreciate all the support you guys give me, especially the support on this video right here. And so this is the first official review of 2025. And honestly, this is this is one of the first big releases of 2025 as well. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, I say, was the first one. Dynasty Warriors, it's big in its own right, but it definitely was not one of the biggest releases of the year. And then Ninja Gaiden Black 2 was kind of a shadow drop type thing. So, but yeah, welcome to the first official review of 2025. And just a little quick breakdown. We are going to be kind of changing the format. I'm taking reviews much more seriously in 2025, and I think you're going to see that with this video. I have tons of notes. I have tons of bullet points. We're going to go over everything, and that's how we're going to treat every review, because I think every game deserves a proper analyzation. And this is also going to be a more critique me. I'm going to try and critique things a lot more. I'm not just going to be like, oh yeah, that's fun, it was good, yeah, I liked it. We're actually going to talk about things, go in depth. We're going to break everything down, and I'm going to give you my honest thoughts on just a lot of the different aspects about the game, and whether you will like the game, whether you should play the game. Going to break down all of that, and so yeah, thank you all for tuning in, and let's get started with the Avowed review. So there is so many great things that Obsidian has done, and they have just proven themselves over and over and over again. And this is one that I've been very excited because I'm personally a huge fantasy fan. I love fantasy, and I think Obsidian working on fantasy is, number one, super exciting, but I think it's very promising as well. And so going into this game, I kind of expected to love the game. Right? I kind of expected to love the game. I wasn't expecting one of the greatest games of the year. I wasn't expecting one of the best games ever. I wasn't expecting like the best Obsidian game ever. And what I came out with is kind of surprising. It's kind of surprising, and we're going to get into all that. And the way these reviews are going to work is I'm going to be breaking down the whole game by 3 different sections: the good, the mixed, and the bad, because I think I have a lot to say on all 3 of those departments. And so we're going to get started talking about the good. Now, these are things that I think make the game stand out. These are things that I think, I would give points to this game for. These are things that I think they did really, really well that heighten the experience, right? So the first thing we're going to talk about, and I'm going to separate all these into different categories. The first category we're going to go into is gameplay. And for me, this is easily the best part of the game, is the gameplay, which is really weird because I feel like for a majority of this game's marketing and, build up, the gameplay was the biggest concern because trailers weren't really doing a great job portraying it. It kind of just looked unpolished. It kind of looked like it needed work, right? And it just kind of felt like it wasn't what we expected. Now, granted, that is because the whole game went through a whole art style switch, so it kind of threw everybody off at first. But when you get down to it, when it's actually in your hands, when you're actually playing the game, the gameplay is easily the best part, and we're gonna get into all those reasons, but for me, this was my favorite part. Throughout the whole game, throughout my 35 hours of playing the game, I just constantly wanted to keep fighting. I wanted to face newer challenges. I wanted to go exploring. I wanted to do side quests. I wanted to do main quests. I wanted to do everything, and I love the combat so much. And that's part of the reason I love the final act of this game, is because there is so much combat. It's so great. Now, the reason I love the combat is for a multitude of reasons. Number one, there's just so much variety and freshness throughout the whole combat system overall, right? This is a game where you basically have two loadouts that you can switch in between. And in those two loadouts, you can have a weapon in your left and right hand. And what this does is it allows you to mix up your combat style so many times. If you want to dual wield wands, you can. If you want to dual wield swords, you can. If you want one wand and one shield, if you want a mace and an axe, if you want a gun and a shield, if you want an elemental book and a pistol, you can do that. You can mix and match the combat however you want to fit your playstyle. Personally, I ended up rocking a two-handed weapon in one of my loadouts, whether it was a greatsword or a warhammer. And then in my second loadout, I rocked the elemental book and the wand. I think the elemental book is called a grimoire or something like that. If you've played the game, you know. But this is easily what I love, because there are certain enemies where you almost have to use certain weapons because it just gives you such an advantage. There are some enemies where they will just constantly get up in your face and you have to switch to a melee weapon. You can't just keep flicking a wand when they're right up against your face, right? But then there are some enemies that like to stay back and shoot projectiles. Therefore, if you switch to a wand, you can take care of those much better. Or you can switch to a gun and shoot them, right? There's so many different reasons why the combination, the mixing and matching works really, really well. Not only that, but I think the gameplay just feels fantastic. It feels impactful. Like when you hit an enemy, you really feel it, you know, whether it's the animation or the vibration. Just the impact, it feels punchy, it feels crisp, it feels polished, which is something I wasn't really expecting. Like it doesn't feel janky. Like it doesn't feel janky. It doesn't feel like, you know, sometimes you just completely whiff a shot even though you could have swore you hit it. Maybe there's like once or twice, but for the most part, through 35 hours, I thought it was a super polished, super fun, and just really satisfying gameplay / combat system. And that's not even all about gameplay that I love, right? There is a large set of skills, there's a large set of statistics that you have to work throughout the whole game, multiple skill trees, depending on what build you want to have, right? That's something else I love about this game, is that the replayability is there because you can have multiple different characters. If you want to be a ranger throughout the whole thing, you can. And that's not even something that you choose when creating your character. That's just something like halfway through the game, you're like, you know what? I really like using this gun. I'm gonna just turn my character into a ranger. You can do that because you can put all those points towards the ranger skill trees and the ranger skills, right? I absolutely love that about this game. There's so much replayability. There's so much variation within the combat, and it's fun. And that's the most important thing, right? But not only that, I do love the RPG systems in terms of statistics. You know, you have your strength, dexterity, all that stuff, right? It works super duper well. It helps with the whole idea that, hey, you can make whatever character you want. You can make whatever build you want. And I think that is very, very great. And overall, I just love the structure. You have a mana bar, you have a health bar, you have stamina, you know, you have like your abilities in certain slots, you have your consumables in certain slots, you have your ability wheel for your companions. I think that is really well. I think another good thing about this game is I do think they do companions very well in terms of combat. I think they utilize them in a very strong way. Very similar to Dragon Age and Mass Effect, right? So I think that is very great. I think the gameplay overall is awesome, and that is also complemented by what I think is fantastic mobility and exploration, right? When we're talking sprinting, vaulting up ledges, jumping. There's a lot of platforming in this game, which is something that completely surprised me. I think it feels super great. It just feels super, super great, super polished, super fun, right? I think the dodging is very well done, especially for a first-person game. Granted, you can go into third person, but I played almost my entire game in first person. And I do think that is the way to play, in my personal opinion. I was not a big fan of the third-person mode. Now we're going to go to the visuals, because this is the thing that I also think is easily one of the best parts about this game. If you wanted to say this is the best part about the game, I wouldn't argue with you. And in some ways, I would agree with you, because, I mean, the simple thing here, and I have it in my notes right here, I'm going to just read it to you. Art direction cooks, because it absolutely does. Whether we're talking about all the different environments that you end up going to, whether you're on a volcano island, whether you are in a forest, whether you are in a snowy mountain, the art direction just goes crazy. It's heightened by the colors, it's heightened by its awesome design, its atmosphere. The art direction is fantastic. When you looking in the distance, the amount of distance and views that you're going to see in this game is just breathtaking. This is one game where almost every new area I went to, I had to take a picture and post it on my story, because I was like, this just looks fantastic, right? Like this is, there are some parts where you're like, how did they even do this, right? And there is a part that we're going to talk about later that I feel like, because this aspect is so good, that's what impacts the other aspect. We're going to talk about that later, but just know that the visuals in this game are just absolutely outstanding, stunning, if you will. And that also goes for just, you know, the creative look of the game, right? I think characters look very neat. I think enemy designs are very, very good. And I think that just goes to show you, number one, that Obsidian loved working in a fantasy world. I think they love the Pillars of Eternity universe, and I have to agree. I think the Pillars of Eternity universe is very, very cool. And yeah, I think visuals just overall absolutely cooked. Like, I don't know. There's really only one negative about visuals, which we're going to talk about later. But overall, absolutely outstanding. The music, there is a lot of standout tracks here. Like, whether we're talking about the main theme, whether we're talking about some boss themes, whether we're talking about some just idle music, right? There is a lot of great musics. Overall, I think it heightens the game. I think the music, I would easily give a thumbs up to. I think the music, it just does its job really, really well. And then here's where we're going to get to the story, right? The story, this is obviously, I feel like going into this game, this is what everybody expected Obsidian to deliver on. I feel like this is what, you know, everybody was like, okay, if there's one thing that's going to be good about this game, it's going to be the story. And I think there are some good pieces here. I think number one, which is not really what I expected, but I think the humor is very good in this game. Like, there were many, many times where I'm laughing out loud during this game, because I just find it hilarious. Even there were times where my dad was sitting on my couch watching me play the game as well, and some of the dialogue options, some of the things characters were saying, he thought it was hilarious too, because it is a very funny game. Like, you know, you have these insane godlike conversations with tons of terminology, that things you don't understand in the Pillars of Eternity universe, but then there are just some lines that are just so real. Like, what are you talking about? Like, there are literally lines in this game where it's like, what are you talking about? Like, I don't even know what you mean. Like, there's literally some like dialogue options. Can you speak English? Like, it's absolutely hilarious. I think they absolutely cooked with the humor, and on top of that, I think that is due to the voice acting. I think the voice acting is very, very great. I think the voice acting, everybody, I think, played a big part in that. There's one character in this game, his name is Kai. He's one of your companions. He's actually the voice of Garrus from Mass Effect, so I think that's actually pretty neat. As a big fan of Mass Effect, I just have to throw that in there. But overall, I love the world building. Like I said, I think the Pillars of Eternity universe is very neat in its own right. I love the world building and attention to lore. Now, this isn't something where I necessarily like fell in love with it, or this is not something that I would per se is like one of my favorite parts. I'm not gonna watch watch videos on this game's lore or go exploring just to find more world building, but I think what is there is very strong, right? If you are somebody who loves just digging in tons of lore and figuring out world building on a constant basis, this game has tons of it. And I think it does a good job not throwing it all in your face, but giving you so much where it's super duper accessible. So I think that they found a really good balance there. And overall, I think the pacing of the game is really great. I like it. It's a pretty short game, all things considered. Granted, my 35 hours was due to side quests, due to companion quests, due to going exploring, trying to find better weapons, right? This game does kind of have a difficulty spike at times. So going exploring for better weapons and equipment is definitely a must. But for the most part, if you just straight shot the main story, you could probably finish in like 12 to 15 hours. And so, yeah, I thought the pacing was really great. There are 5 zones that you go to within the game. And I think each zone is cool in their own sense. You do a couple main quests in each zone until you reach the final zone with the final quest, and that's pretty much it. I think the pacing is really good. I don't feel like there's filler. I don't feel like there is I don't feel like the game drags, right? And I think that is a very, very good thing for a lot of games. And then other things that I thought was good, right? This is the etc. category. Is I love the size and scope of the game. This is a focused. This isn't a massive open world RPG. This isn't, a 100-hour experience. This is a condensed, focused RPG. Like I said, 12 to 15 hours. You can go way beyond that if you want, which I love. But majority of the meat of the game is super focused, super condensed, and I absolutely love that. I also love the scope of the game. There are so many set pieces where it's like you're looking up at this ginormous castle or this ginormous volcano, and you're like, wow, like I can't believe I'm living in this world. And I think they do such a great job. And then also I have to throw in there, the cover art on this game is absolutely fire. The cover art is just awesome. But at the end of the day, that is something that improves my overall thoughts and experience of the game, is the cover art, because I absolutely love the cover art. So I got to throw it in there in my review. But now we're going to move on to the mix. Now, the mix stuff is things that, while don't necessarily negatively affect the game, they don't really help it either, right? These are things where I'm like, okay, if you make a sequel, these are things that I would probably try to improve on. Or these are things where I'm like, okay, maybe in some upcoming updates, you should tweak it or update it, right? These are things where I don't think this is going to be a bad thing about the game. I just don't think this is something that necessarily helps it in any way, right? And so we're going to start with the gameplay. And during combat, there can be status effects that can be really annoying. And I'm not talking about the annoying in the sense of, it makes it really hard. Like, if you get electrocuted or frozen, your whole screen just stays like, they put like this color overlay over it sometimes, or they'll put this like color around the border of the screen, and it's sometimes just super duper intense where it's like ruining like the look of the game in a way. Like sometimes there's just so much going on, and then your whole screen will turn like green, like very green, right? I just personally find that really annoying. You can portray being poisoned, being burned, being electrocuted, being iced over in a much better way than like just making your whole screen like basically overlaid in a color, right? And it's not even the problem of like, okay, it happens for like 5 seconds. It stays like that for like 30 seconds. Again, I don't think this is a bad thing because I get what they're trying to do here. And it didn't really ruin the gameplay for me, right? I still think the gameplay is phenomenal. It's just something I'm like, yo, just lower the intensity of that. Lower, right? I don't think it ruins gameplay system at all. I think it's just a visual pleasure that I think they could improve on. Other than that, gameplay wise, I ran into a few bugs. Really didn't run into many bugs. There was one game breaking bug I had when exploring. I just kind of fell through the map randomly. That was like the one time I had to like reload the game because of a bug. But other than that, it was just minor visual glitches. Sometimes a hit didn't register or something, but other than that, very minor stuff. But then in terms of the system, I wish there was a little more enemy variety. I think what is there is great. I just personally, if you're going to do a sequel, I would love to see a lot more enemy variety. And then the same thing, or not same thing, even though I love the exploration, even though the map is in a size where you can easily just run everywhere, I do feel like there is definitely room here for a traversal mount. I just feel like it would add a little bit of extra pizzazz, whether it's a horse, whether it's whatever. I just think some sort of mount would just make it overall a better experience, but I don't think that that's a necessity. There were just times where I'm like, man, I wish I had a horse right now, you know what I mean? But other than that, I think it's the exploration is very, very good. And then the story, the only mixed part I have about the story, the rest either falls in the good or bad, is I feel like the ending, I feel like it left me wanting more. Right, I think in terms of the actual game, in terms of like cutscenes or whatnot, the ending was kind of underwhelming. But what I really liked about the ending is afterwards, they then go on like a 15-minute cutscene with just like art, pictures, and there's like a narrator explaining what happens to every character afterwards, what happens to every faction, what happens to the world, what happens to the overarching plot. And I love that. I think they did a fantastic job with that. I just wish there was more actual like in-game cutscenes or like a moment after the boss fight. Literally, as soon as you defeat the final boss, it literally just like looks up into the sky and fades to black. Boom, that's it. And then we go into like a bunch of pictures where a narrator explains the ending. So I feel like it was kind of underwhelming, but at the same time, there is a lot there where I could see somebody be like, yo, the ending, honestly, they like did a lot more than they probably had to, because it really is like a whole 10 minutes of just a narrator explaining the ending, which is good and bad for some people depending on what you like. Audio, at times there would be like voices or voice lines that would like, I feel like the audio like lowered, like it was in the background for some reason, even though like they're right in front of my face. And then sometimes like the sound of impacts would be delayed. So again, minor bug fixes that can be updated, of course. And then my etc. mixed feeling is I feel like the character creation was just okay. This was something I was very excited about because being in Avowed, being in the Pillars of Eternity universe, being Obsidian fantasy game, I feel like they could have done a lot more with the character creation. I feel like we could have gotten more wackier with it. There is one segment where you can choose like a godlike feature. I think it's cool, but it's also whatever in the same sense. I like what they were going for. I just don't think they did it well. And I just think the character creation overall is kind of generic. So that is something I feel kind of mixed about. But at the same time, I'm just glad we get to make our own character. And I think the characters look good, right? So yeah, that's something that is mixed for me. But now we're going to move on to the bad. And unfortunately, this is where we're going to take a little bit of a dip in this game. So the only thing bad about the gameplay that personally I feel is I feel like there needs to be more weapon variety. I know I said how I love the variety they have, and I'm not talking about the gameplay system. The system and how it works and how you actually fight, I think is amazing. What I'm talking about is you have so many weapons. You have wands, you have swords, you have maces, you have bows, you have guns, right? The problem is you don't get different kinds of those. You don't get a different wand. You don't get a different type of sword. You don't get a different type of hammer. You just get an upgraded version of that hammer, right? So within the first hour of the game, you're going to have every weapon in the game, right? It's just throughout your journey, you're going to find upgraded versions of those weapons. And it's not like, oh, I have a hammer that can do this. No, it's just a hammer that does more damage. It's the same hammer you were using at the very start. It just does more damage. It has more passive abilities. I just wish there were more variety in the types of weapons you get. Not the weapons specifically you get, just the typing, the look of them, right? Whether it is just you turn this hammer into a really cool looking hammer, right? It just looked like a more powerful version of the hammer. And I feel like that was kind of underwhelming, where to the point where I'm like, I don't really care about finding new weapons. I just want to make it stronger. And I feel like that's kind of unexciting in a way for people who like that sort of thing, who like customization, who like exploration. That might be something that turns you off, and I can completely see why. But that's really the only complaint I have about gameplay, is I just feel like there needs to be more variety within the weapon and the looting. So And then that just goes for customization as a whole as well, like armor as well. And yeah, just character stuff. I feel like there needs to be more variety within that. Visually, this is unfortunately where one of my biggest issues comes into play, and that is this game right now has pretty bad performance. At least for me, what I experienced, I had a lot of frame rate issues, and I'm talking playing the game, but also the worst part is when you're in dialogue moments, certain characters will be in like 30 frames per second, sometimes even sub 30 frames per second. So like when you're in a dialogue moment and the other character's just standing there talking to you, everything behind them, everything around them is running in 60 frames per second, but for some reason their character model is running like 30 frames per second, and it's just really annoying. It's really annoying. It takes you out of it so many times. But then also during gameplay there are a lot of frame drops, which again, this is something they can easily fix, and I think they will, and I think that will help the game in a large portion. But unfortunately, this is my review of playing the game, and while I was playing the game, that is something really negative that I experienced. So I kind of have to put it in there. And then in terms of visuals, I think there are some character designs that are just not really interesting, or I think they are too similar. There are a lot of species where it's just like, okay, that just looks like the same exact dude, just they change the hairstyle, right? Or that it's the same dude, he's just wearing red instead of blue. Like there is so many similar characters, and I feel like they could have, again, being in that Pillars of Eternity universe, being Obsidian and unlocking a new IP in a fantasy setting, I feel like you could have done so much more. Again, what is there though is good. I feel like it definitely, character designs got a little bit repetitive, or just not really interesting enough. Now, unfortunately, in my opinion, the worst part of the game, and this is the biggest shock, and that's why at the beginning of the video I said I was kind of surprised with what I came out with. The one thing I was almost for sure confident would be a strong part of the game, I feel like is the game's biggest weakness, and to me that is the story. Now, I'm not going to say the story's bad, because it's not bad. I just think it's kind of underwhelming, especially when we're comparing other Obsidian games. When you go into it, you have certain expectations, especially when it's a established studio. You are gonna have certain expectations, and my expectation for Obsidian is great writing, great characters, great story, and I just don't feel like I got that with this game. I think overall it was kind of disappointing. While still, I think fine, right? It's fine. I think it does its job for the most part. It feels in the background, it feels like they wanted to just focus more on gameplay than they did actually the game, or the story. And that kind of just disappointed me, right? Because there were no emotional beats that really hit for me. Like, I was like, man, I love that moment, or man, I love what that character just did. There was just none of that, right? I had really no big emotional beats. I found a lot of parts exciting, I'll say that. Like, there were a lot of cool, I'm like, yo, that's awesome. But there were just no huge emotional beats for me. And part of that is I did find the characters uninteresting. I did not really love any of the companions. There were some that there were two of them, specifically Marius and Giada. I don't know how to pronounce it. I think them two were probably my favorite, but even then, I didn't really feel attached to them. I didn't really love their stories. And there are a lot of moments in this game where I feel like the dialogue is overbearing. And not in the sense of, like, there are so many games where it's like, bro, let me play the game already, right? Like, I've been here for 20 minutes just talking to people. And there are moments where it's like, okay, all right, wrap it up, let me go. But there's no moments where you're, like, sitting there for 20 minutes just reading dialogue. I feel like you can get past dialogue pretty well. I'm talking about, there are dialogue moments where they are just throwing tons of terminology in your face, whether it's world building or lore, right? Like, there are moments where they're using so many terminology in the Pillars of Eternity universe where you're like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't understand what is going on right now. And it just kind of leads to a poor experience, right? When trying to digest the game's story and writing. And on top of that, I personally found the plot was just super duper generic. There's a disease and you have to go try and figure out a way to stop the disease. Oh, and you're chosen by a god. Yeah, I don't know. It didn't really do anything for me. And then on top of that, with an RPG like this, with companions and stuff, I feel like the relationship building and the writing with your companions just really didn't do much, right? There's no romance in this game, which I will say I didn't think would be an issue, but after playing Dragon Age and the Mass Effect games recently, playing this game, there were moments where I'm like, man, I feel like this game definitely could have used like a whole romance system. And I know that's really weird, but like that's actually so true. Like romance options add so much to a game's RPG system, right? And then at the same time, relationships are bare. There are a lot of choices that you can make in this game where it's like, okay, you should hate me. You should hate me. You should leave our team right now because of the choice I just made. And they're like, I don't agree with you. Let's move on. It's like, okay, like you could have done so much more there, right? So overall, I just feel like the story just didn't really live up to what I expected, right? And again, I know I just said a bunch of bad things. And at the end of the day, there are still some great things. There are some good characters. There are some fun, exciting moments, right? There are some plot points where I thought were interesting, whether it was, the enemy faction burning down cities and you dealing with a lot of loss and stuff like that. I think there are some great moments. I just think overall, when I'm going to look back at this game's story, it's kind of weak in my opinion, or it just didn't really work for me. There are people who love the story and love the companions and love the characters and writing, and more power to them, but for me, I just didn't really get anything out of it. And I guess I will also put that, I'll go back to what I was saying in the good section. There are choices that you can make in this game that do feel like they have consequences, that do feel like you do impact. There is one choice specifically about halfway through the game where I generally sat there for like 5 minutes trying to decide what I wanted to choose, and then I went and talked to certain characters afterwards, and it really seemed like they hated me. Like I was like, oh, I think I may have made the wrong decision. So there are great moments in the story. I just think overall as a product, I don't think the story hit. And so Obsidian once again delivers a great RPG with so many improvements across the board. Unfortunately, while you can see the increase in budget, the story and performance of the game underdelivers from what we expect from this talented studio. With fantastic gameplay and stunning visuals, this is a game where fixes and adjustments can make it special. This is the first game Obsidian has made where it's a big RPG under Microsoft's umbrella, under their budget, under their resources, right? This is a game that had a lot of potential. And I feel like, again, there are a lot of really, really great parts of this game, and that's going to reflect in my score. I just feel like the big part we expected to be great was not, and that is the story. And therefore, I am going to give it an 8 out of 10 and a B tier ranking, meaning it's great, because it is great. I don't think this is a bad game whatsoever. And personally, I wouldn't even just say. I wouldn't even say it's just a good game, because there are so many aspects about this game that are so special and that are so much better than so many other games. Visually and gameplay wise, this is one of the best. Like, I'm very confident at the end of the year, this game will be in contention for best gameplay or best visuals, because it absolutely delivers on that. Unfortunately, as an Obsidian fan, as an RPG fan, the story just didn't deliver. Obviously, there are performance issues that can be fixed, but it also negatively affected my experience. I think there are so many things to love about this game. If you're an RPG fan, play it. Absolutely, play it. It's on the Game Pass. Do it. If you're not an RPG fan, you can probably skip out on it. Like, I'm not gonna lie. I don't think you're like going to miss anything. But I think if you're just a fan of good games, I think if you are just a fan of trying new things, absolutely I'd recommend this game, because it is super duper fun. There's so many great components. I just think you'll be left wanting a little bit more. And so that is going to finalize my review of Avowed, giving it an 8 out of 10 B tier ranking. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next review or video. Johnny Murray out. Peace.